Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I'm very, very excited and honored to be interviewing a very special space champion, Dr. Lance Bush. Dr. Bush is a special government employee at NASA and a council member of the Council on Global Competition and Innovation. He is the founder of the world-renowned organization that we all know and love, Space Generation Advisory Council. He was a part of the White House National Space Council's Users Advisory Group and was formerly the president and CEO of Challenger Center, a global nonprofit STEM education organization. With a goal to inspire more students, Dr. Bush has led the growth and expansion of the organization, which has reached 6 million students with its experiential education programs. Dr. Bush began his career as a NASA engineer in a group that designed the next generation human space transportation, including low Earth orbit and lunar vehicles, managed the ISS Commercial Development Program, and co-founded and served as the chairman of the ISS Multilateral Commercialization Group. He represented the United States as a delegate to the United Nations Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space and served as a chief strategic officer at Paragon Space Development Corporation. As you can see, Dr. Bush is a visionary leader of the aerospace sector and has so many interdisciplinary interests, both in the education, engineering, as well as the policy side of aerospace. And I'm excited to learn about his career journey. So, welcome, Dr. Bush. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation of aerospace leaders.
Thank you for having me, Gitika. And I want to say that I was thrilled to be on here when you invited me because I looked up your background and why you would do this. And I realized, you're just the kind of person, we have a lot in common, you and I, many, you know, decades apart, but that we want to help others. We see the vision and the power and the beauty of space as it relates to humanity. And I like what you're doing with Ignited Thinkers. I'm honored to be on the show, but I thought it would be nice to have this conversation. And so thank you for having me.
Thank you. That means a lot to me because I was inspired by all the work that you've been able to do. And I was very intrigued with your educational initiatives as well and kind of what sparked those. But first, I would love to learn a little bit about what you currently are doing. I mentioned that you're working at NASA, but you're also part of the Council on Global Competition and Innovation. So what are those roles currently entail for you? How does a typical day in your life look like?
Thank you. So in addition to those two roles you named, I think I'm serving as an advisor for a dozen to 14 different organizations. I don't always list them all out, but I generally, and these are just organizations who have approached me. I thought I was going to retire and, kind of, do my hobbies like surfing and visit my family and friends, which I am doing, by the way. When you say my day to day, I'm doing scuba diving and I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro this year. But I'm thankful that these organizations have reached out to me. There's about 75% of them, eight or so are what I would say nonprofits. They may be education. They're as broad as I'm a judge for the United Kingdom's Marshall Scholarships, which are kind of their highest, honor to still serving on board of directors, as, Space Generation Advisory Council, a bunch of things like that. To the two that you mentioned, which are, these are kind of high level policy things. And I'm also serving with some corporations um, and helping them look at issues. But all of them, the common thread is what can I do to help humanity at this point, be a better mentor, realize where I am in life, kind of help people along in other organizations with what I know. But I'm learning every day as well because there's artificial intelligence and quantum computing and frankly the space industry, the space activities at this point are more exciting than they've ever been. When I started my career, there were like two countries doing this. No real commerce, happen. Not to the scale we have now. Now you have all kind of companies. There's like so many that people have never even heard of, which are awesome and doing incredible things. We're coming to the point where we have a problem in low Earth orbit, and with so many actors, and we have lots of government. We have, something like 80, 90, 100 countries who have space agencies or space activities. So it's a really exciting time. So I'm glad that I can still participate, and I get inspired, and I love the new visions from the young people that I get to work with. So my days are um, kind of fluid. It depends on who I'm talking to. I just had a discussion this morning from somebody from a foreign country who has a very advanced technology, and they wanted to know how they could use it in space for the betterment of humanity. And that was an amazing conversation. So those are the kind of things I'm doing.
Wow, that's incredible. And I'm sure it's fun to be able to, have it more as a hobby where you're involved in so many different projects and being able to input your advice, your experiences into these new endeavors. So that's really exciting. And you mentioned a really important point that I'm personally very fascinated with as well, which is like the growing space economy internationally. I feel like we've seen a lot of things happening in the US and there's been a lot of growth and development, but particularly in a lot of international space economies, it's been growing in the past 5 years, 10 years, a lot more. So I'm curious about how do you see international space economy growing in the next 5, 10 years? Do you think there's a little bit of excitement or hesitation in this field? And how do you see maybe the US working with more countries more internationally? How do you see this overall, the global space economy looking like in the next 10 years?
Yeah. So, of course, this is my opinion, and not always shared by all my colleagues, but I think it's going to grow. It's going to continue this incredible growth. I was an early believer in commerce in space, really just from a philosophical, and anthropomorphic or anthropology kind of
Yeah,
approach that, like, hey, we're humans, and we've explored all kind of places, and we have taken the good and the bad of humanity wherever we've gone. And space, we're part of space. I mean, some people, occasionally somebody will ask me if I've been in space, and I'll say, well, actually, we both are right now, like,
yeah,
because
yeah,
otherwise the entire universe is space, and then there's just a dotted line around us on Earth,
right,
and we're not. But which I make that statement because we are, we're just at the infancy of this because we can barely get off our little
yeah,
planet. But we're going to be out there further and further, and we're going to take with us, our desires, our interests, our beliefs, and so there is a lot that I believe is going to happen now, and especially as I see, bring it back down to some reality right now. Um, like I said, when we went to international conferences years ago, it was like, I, actually, I'm surprised we had international congresses years ago. Now that I think about it, it's like, how did we have all these international congresses when there were only like a couple of spacefaring countries? But, now it's like you go to a congress and you're like, wow, you see some small country. Now, I won't call anybody out because I don't want
right.
to be awkward, but I mean, I'm even shocked sometimes, like, wow, that country's involved. And I met with the head of the Rwandan Space Agency last year and the Philippines a couple of years ago. And those are two space agencies that are, I think, 2 or 3 years old. And they're doing the things that are important to them. They're using their assets to look at things like, their agriculture, their border safety, um, you know, in Rwanda, it's kind of like, concerned about the gorillas. And so anyway, there's just a lot going on. And as we said, with the commerce, you can get really, there's, people talking about data centers, but there's, the worries about rare earth minerals. And I will say that, the economics of this don't work right now, but like if we ever really need anything, the asteroid belts are filled with precious minerals and gems. And, if we really wanted, you could, we've already proven through a DART mission that we can intercept the comet, redirect it, or an asteroid. And, there's and the energy, I'll just finish this thought with one thing because I love saying this, but we sit down here on Earth, and we have conflicts amongst the same species of humans over things like energy, basic things like energy. But all our energy here on Earth came from one star, the sun, almost, you can attribute almost all of it. And we get it in the most passive, primitive ways. You know, we dig up stuff and then we burn it and we, and then you look out but you look out there and you go, okay, but the sun's a nuclear fusion reactor, like the biggest nuclear fusion reactor, and there's hundreds of billions of those in our galaxy, and there's a couple trillion galaxies, which, by the way, a couple months ago you say hundreds of billions, but now we know there are trillions, but because of space activity. But also black holes are out there, and in my lifetime it was a debate amongst some scientists whether they actually exist or not. Now we've taken a picture, we know they exist, but not a lot of people know that two of them colliding together, we measured the energy generated in that collision, and it was more than the sum of every star in every galaxy.
Oh, I
So
didn't know that. Wow.
So I pause at that point and go, wow. And we're sitting down here still like digging stuff up
Right.
and fighting over it. And, when I say stuff like this, I have some colleagues that are like, Lance, now you're talking like a crazy person because that's like so, like so far out. And I'm like, well, like I'm sure the person who was talking about walking on the moon in 1940 or 1950 also sounded really crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, I think there's a lot going to be happening. I think for those of us who are visionaries, it won't happen quick enough. I was watching Dan Golden's interview by you earlier today. It won't happen quick enough, but for many people, it will happen much quicker than they believe.
Yes, definitely. And, in this conversation, do you have, when you're talking with all of these global agencies, and you said there was a huge growth that you've seen, do you have any battles sometimes trying to convince stakeholders, convincing investors of the importance of reaching these visionary goals we have? Or has it been less of a battle recently? I am curious of kind of being more in that advocacy role. Do you see any challenges with the narrative that we're pushing in space, or has it become easier over time?
No, I think it's still a challenge. It's still
Yeah.
absolutely a challenge. And to be fair, um, there has to be considerations of the trade because there's limited
Mm,
resources, and um, we do have needs on Earth, with feeding everybody and having water and addressing, climate change and other
right,
sustainability issues. Um, so yeah, I understand that, but on the other hand, I love being a part of the space community because it is one of those few areas where allows you to be creative and visionary and think, how can I use this
right.
to solve the problems here? And that's why I'm drawn to like, well, maybe we can get the energy, or maybe we can change climate by putting a deflector at the Lagrangian point, deflecting enough solar power. And so that's actually one of the projects I'm with a couple of other crazy genius people from around the world where it's a loose group of us kind of starting to think about, is that doable? I mean, it's on the order of a $7 trillion effort, which kind of again seems laughable when you say, well, that's the entire annual budget of the US in 1 year. But um, I am heartened, I should say optimistic that people are investing in it, that we've reduced the launch cost, we've made it accessible enough that so many countries now can put up satellites to help them with their agriculture, with their disaster prevention. And we have these eyes in the sky that help us, get truths about what's going on in the world. So I'm optimistic. I think things are going in the right direction. And then yes, it's always going to be a challenge to get the resources we need. It has been that way in space since the beginning. But I think as long as we keep looking at it as a way to help humanity here, then we're doing the right things.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was listening to another talk, another panel where they were like emphasizing to especially people who are interested in having a startup in space, trying to emphasize that like vertical of how it connects back down to Earth and all these applications we have so that you can show that this, product, this technology you're creating actually has so many applications in so many industries here on Earth. So I think bringing that back down to home can be very, very powerful. And in that, like, kind of as you're talking, I think it's very evident how you're very passionate about space. And I was really intrigued with your background because I noticed that when you were studying, you had an engineering background and you went into advocacy work, but you also did a lot of work with education and especially with the Space Generation Advisory Council. So I am curious, what was the spark or the aha moment that inspired you to start SGAC, and how did it grow into something so empowering, so inspiring to millions of students across the globe? Like how where was the spark and how did that journey unfold for you?
Okay, thank you for the question. And I'm gonna maybe surprise you, but I'm gonna go back 130 years to answer this question. Uh, my grandfather stowed away on a boat to come to this country by himself at the age of 12. He did that to escape being conscripted into the military of the Ottoman Empire. He did at 12. He didn't want to be dragged away from his family,
Yeah.
and that was in God, that was in I want to say like the late 1890s, early 1903 or something like that. Um, And he stowed away on that boat. It took him to South America. He stowed away on another boat from South America to here. He slept in the cargo hold with the bananas. To the day he died, I knew him. He wouldn't eat a banana ever again because that's all he lived on for like 2 weeks.
Wow.
And when he would sleep at night, sometimes the banana spiders would crawl out of this, and crawl all over. Banana spiders are big and hairy and nasty. Anyway, he came to this country. He didn't know the language. He didn't know, he worked farm labor as a coal miner, as a railroad worker. Eventually he got a grocery push cart. Eventually worked his way up to owning a grocery, like a actual storefront grocery. And the town I grew up in, this was a coal mining village. And if you knew um, early days of industrialization, there was essentially indentured servants. The coal mining company would buy like, a whole valley and two
Mhm.
mountains, and then they would put some houses on it. And I say houses, and I use that term loosely because there was no insulation. This is in the mountains of Pennsylvania. Usually not any running water, no toilet. You had a toilet in the corner of your yard, called an outhouse, and put the miners in really bad condition. And then when they went to get their pay after a couple weeks, the miners were told, "Well, actually, you rented our house. You got soap and food from our store, the coal mining store.
Right.
So it looks like you actually owe us money, but no problem. You can keep your job and just keep working." And you just went further into debt. I kind of tell this long story because I grew up in a place where I didn't have a lot of role models. The one role model, some of the role models I had were my grandfather, who worked really hard. And by the way, what he ended up doing, he died when I was 17. And when I went to his funeral, there was this line of people out the door around the corner, more people than lived in our village. So I didn't understand it. Um, and a lot of people came up and I didn't recognize them. They said, "We want to thank you. Your father saved our lives, your grandfather." Um, that night, when our family was gathering back in my grandfather's home, I asked my parents, I'm 17, I'm like, I don't understand, like, what did grandfather do? And they're like, well, when the miners finally decided to go on strike, your grandfather had an independent store and he fed them. Because otherwise the coal mining company would turn off they could never go on strike. They could never get the rights they needed to get safe conditions in their own and pay. So they had to can the company kicked them out of their homes. They were in tents in a field, my grandfather's field. My grandfather fed them. My grandfather was threatened. His life was threatened by the coal mining company. They arrested him a couple of times on trumped up charges. He got out of it. But essentially, the coal miners got better conditions, better pay. He helped save them. And in my little village, that became apparent to me that, it was really important. All we had was each other. We didn't have, much, we didn't have much of anything. We had community. our own reputation and hard work. And so him being so noble and putting himself out there, and everything he did. And I'm not paying proper homage to all my other grandparents or other people there, but I just talk about him as one case. It really inspired me to say, I really want to do something good for humanity. I don't know what that is. Really, at 17, I don't really know what that is, but I want to do something. I want to really help people. At that point, my parents said, hey, we've scraped together our pennies and nickels, and we've saved enough for you to go to college. We think you should be an engineer because, we can't afford to send you to college and you not have a job. Like their vision was, we need you to have go. And I said, okay. So I went to college to get an engineering degree. Halfway through, my first 2 years in, if you know anything about this, you're just taking general engineering courses. You
Yes.
declare your specific major, and this is kind of embarrassing to admit to the public, but I was so unawares of the world at that time. I was just struggling to do my best in these courses, um, coming from my village of 100 people, and that when it came time to register for the type of engineering I was going to do, I walked into the registrar's office. It was at the Christmas break. I didn't know, there was nobody in there, and I asked the lady for the form. She gives me the form. This is back in the old days when you don't do everything digital.
Right.
Piece of paper. I start filling out the paper with my name, and then gets to the part where it's the major, and she's like, and I'm just standing there looking at it, and she was sitting back down at her desk. She walks back over. She's like, "Can I help you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I need to fill this out." And she says, "Well, don't you know what you want to do?" I said, "Well, what kind of engineering do you have?" As if it was a like, what
Right.
flavors do you have of ice cream? Like I didn't even know, like, this is how naive I was at the time. And I think she said something to the effect of like, "Oh, honey, let me help you." And she reached underneath and got out the registrar's book, and we flipped to the pages where they had little descriptions of the engineering, and we read them together. And I was like, that aerospace engineering sounds super cool. I'll do that. And that's what I did. And then out of college, I got very fortunate to be hired into the group at NASA who designed Mercury, Gemini, Apollo. Those were my mentors. That's where Katherine Johnson worked.
Wow.
I worked with her. Yes, I'm old enough. I actually worked with Katherine Johnson. And my first week there, and I'm getting to your point about the young people. My first week there, the branch chief walks in. We have a branch meeting, and they just start talking about all the project. The branch chief's talking about the projects and what to do and who's doing what. And I am completely lost because one, he's using all kind of acronyms, and NASA loves acronyms. It's known
Yeah.
for acronyms, but they have ones that are specific only to their groups. Like they just
Oh,
every
yeah.
project comes up with its own, the software that they use that they developed in their group is it. So by the time he was done talking, I had no idea what we were talking about because there's all these acronyms. And I was a little bit concerned, like I might be losing my job here because I'm so not prepared for this. And then he said meeting's over, and then he got up to leave, and they said, "Oh, wait, one more thing." As people were pushing their chairs back, I said, "One more thing." He's like, "Oh, the people, the teacher over at Pocosin Elementary School called again, and they want somebody to come talk to their first grade class about space." And I'm thinking, "Oh my God, we get to design space vehicles here and talk to kids? Like that sounds so cool to talk to some kids about this." So I raise my hand like I'm still in college. I'm raising my hand in a professional meeting. And I'm like, "Oh, oh, oh, me." And I'm thinking, I'm not going to get this job because, I just started. I'm the junior person.
Right.
I look around the room and all the other engineers are like this with their head down, trying not to be picked
Yeah.
because that's what kind of engineers were around when I was a kid, when I was young. Anyway, I get the job. I go up to the branch chief. I say, "Hey, do we have like a set of slides we normally use, or do you like, how do you?" And he just hands me the phone. He goes, "Here's the phone number of the teacher. You'll figure something out." And he leaves. So I
Oh,
think, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I'll teach them how to like make a space vehicle. And I'm like, let's design a space vehicle together. I go to the classroom. I asked them, let's design a space vehicle together. And then, through the process of just creativity and it was the only space vehicle I ever designed that had a hot tub in it. That was great, great addition. But through that, we learned about, microgravity and what it does to water. Um, but I had such a great time. I volunteered. And so from that first week at NASA, I volunteered to do these things. And I realized that even more so, even though my day job was designing space vehicles, which is like charting the future in some ways, that my work, the volunteer work or the extra work I was doing, going and talking to all these young people and college students and public groups and then getting involved in these other events, Space Generation Advisory Council, that was the way I could really affect the future and humanity to help these people along. And Space Generation Advisory Council, that first group, the very first meeting we had, it included a bunch of people who met each other for the first time, which was like Robbie Shingler and Will Marshall, who started Planet Labs. George Whitesides, who is
Wow.
CEO of Virgin Galactic and now a U.S. representative. Loretta Hidalgo Whitesides, who met George there and is the founder of Yuri's Night.
Wow.
Lisa Kaltenegger, who is now the Carl Sagan Professor of Astronomy at Cornell. She's like, you know,
Amazing. Yeah.
and I could go on about the people who are in that very first one. But so it is happening, like they are now the leaders of space and they're making incredible contributions. And to me, that's really, I feel lucky that in my career, in my lifetime now, I can kind of see these other people doing these cool things. And um, it brings me a calm that we're going to be okay, even in the roughest of days.
Wow, that's incredibly inspiring. And thank you for sharing that entire story. I think it provides a lot of perspective into your personality and kind of the core values that maybe have driven you to start SGAC and to do what you are doing. And I'm sure you're making it seem a lot easier than it actually was to create SGAC and to grow it into what it is today. I mean, I am really curious. Maybe this is like a selfish question to ask because I'm, with Ignited Thinkers, but I'm sure there are a lot of young students who are budding entrepreneurs, students who want to start nonprofit organizations or make an impact in their community. I mean, I think a really important question that I'd love to ask you is how did you create that sustainability with a full-time job? I mean, you had a day job that you were working on. How did you take this idea that you had and actually make it like a sustainable reality? Like that kind of self-running, that organization. How did you kind of make it into something that went on and did its own thing? Like it was like a baby you grew that now is doing its own thing. So I am curious, how did that journey look like for you?
Um, Okay, well, thank you for that question. And you're absolutely right. It was a lot harder than just saying you're going to do it. And I think there was a lot. I know anybody who's done this or can imagine it. It was a lot rougher ride than where it is now. And we had moments where we thought it would absolutely fall. Several moments, where you could have fallen apart any time. I think one is, just to encourage people because it's your passion, passion and drive will take you a long, persistence, even in the face of a lot of reality, will take you a long way. And the second thing is that you need partners, you need smart people, you need teammates. And I know it sounds so cliche, but it is so true. And it's one of the reasons I also I'm a big advocate of collaboration and international space and um, you know the the way space generation, and I'll be specific. I mean, one of the I could spend a whole day, by the way, I could spend a whole day telling you some funny stories about Space Generation Advisory Council behind the scenes, what happened and how it got there. But I'll say this, it's like the at the time, the little bit of how it worked, I was a graduate of International Space University, which was one of the first, international collaborative things with young people. And I was a student, and then I had become a professor there, and I was on the board of directors. And I was on the board of directors, and one of the head of the Office of Outer Space Affairs at the United Nations was on the board of directors of International Space University. And he said to me, "Hey, we have this, Unispace 3 is coming up." And he said, Frank, he was a funny guy. He was like, frankly, they're like boring and nothing gets done. It's a whole bunch of, like very senior people, and they each have their own countries, agendas, which prevent them usually from doing too much collaboration. And he said, he said, would you be willing to get some other ISU, alumni together and try to get some young people there? And you young people can say whatever you want because you won't be officially representing your countries. You can be creative. He said, I'll give you rooms to meet in at the United Nations. I'll let you guys come and make a presentation to the press every day or something. And, if you say something important, if you guys come up with something important, you know, maybe we'll let you speak at the closing ceremony of this Unispace 3. I said, okay. And that's all I needed to hear is that we could give young people a voice. And I was like, this is what we need. We need
Right.
young people who are visionary to have a voice in this place. And I knew as soon as we gave people the opportunity, even to be part of the organizing committee of this, they would jump in full, at the United
Right.
Nations. It was like, oh my
Yeah.
God, this is going to be. So sure enough, myself and a couple colleagues, we got together. One of them, Werner Balog, he was working at the United Nations at the time, another ISU alum. So he was on the
Okay.
inside, I was on the outside. But we got a bunch of ISU alum and there were so many different talents. There was somebody who was great at facilitating the group, and somebody managing the money, and somebody, like it came together so fast. And then when we canvassed countries, some of the countries loved it, some of the official delegations, and they went back and they held an official selection process. Other countries were just kind of ad hoc. They didn't do anything, but somebody from their country found, some young person from their country found out and just got themselves in. We even had somebody who was like not legitimately in within our criteria because you were supposed to be 18 to 35 and she lied about her age. She was 17. Very impressive person now as well. I won't out who she is, but she was 17 when she came because she wanted to be there. And anyway, when they came together that first year, they worked 20-hour days by their own. This was their own desire for 2 weeks. Unispace 3, by the way, the official delegations worked for years in advance on papers and thoughts and meetings leading up to this. We got there and we only had everybody met day one. We had like 10 days to come up with some ideas. By the end, we had like 40 ideas fleshed out of how we would help humanity in the future. We got it down to 10 that were our top 10. And then we presented those. Five of them ended up being five of the 10 that the United Nations, that committee, adopted in the Vienna Declaration, which was an enforceable treaty coming out of that. And then we got the podium during the closing ceremony. And also every day at the press conference, the press clamored into our room to hear what we had to say, and it was a little awkward because they weren't going into the official delegation room to hear what they had to say. But yeah, it all worked out, and I'm happy to talk to you more about how to help you or others, but really, all you need to know is you need to have some passion and determination. And trust me, I had some points where I thought it was falling apart, or even it was going, but kind of, it took a little bit of a dip. And but we're now what, that was 99 was the first one, so we're at 27 years now, so not bad. Yeah, and we incorporated first here in the US because it was quick and I literally, me, like I wrote a check and sent the form in and, had a friend do the filing until it took longer to create us in Vienna. Then we joined the two organizations on and on and on. But anyway, there's fantastic people. I am trying at some point to get all the different chairs over time, us to write our little piece of the history so they have it. Um, because we don't have that, but it's just all oral history, I think, at this point. But anyway, I better stop talking. I'm talking way longer than I should for these answers.
No, no, that's amazing. Thank you for that perspective. I think what you said really resonated with is, passion goes a really long way and perseverance goes a really long way. So getting yourself into different rooms, talking with people and like networking and just putting yourself and putting what you're doing out there, there could be many synergies with what other people are doing. So definitely, I think that resonates a lot with, I'm sure, a lot of young founders and any founders who are interested in doing something. And so I did want to ask you one question before I get to my final question, which was about your interest in space policy and advocacy. So you said you had, well, I was reading you had an engineering background. You mentioned it briefly, and then you went to work at NASA. How did you kind of evolve yourself as like a young professional, knowing that you did all this work, but now you wanted to enter kind of this advocacy phase and more of like into these leadership roles? I think it can be intimidating even as a young professional or middle of your career trying to pivot. So what did that pivot look like for you?
So I worked on a lot of pretty cool projects early on in my career, which were human space vehicles. One was called the HL-20, which eventually became the Dream Chaser at Sierra Nevada as a winged vehicle. A lot of heritage in that vehicle. It was maybe one of the best engineered vehicles of space vehicles of all time. Um, and I worked on a national aerospace plane, which was like the concept of flying from, New York to Tokyo in 2 hours and going hypersonic. Um, and I worked on some lunar mission stuff and some other things. And, what I started to realize is, NASA, and I was down kind of the bottom of an organization at NASA, and we're an agency, and there's Congress and the White House. And what I started realizing is like, wow, you can do a whole lot of great work as an engineer, but um, I wanted my stuff to have importance in the world, like make a difference to people. And I felt disappointed in some of the decisions, policy decisions that were being made in our country. I felt like, Congress didn't have a high science literacy, um, and ability to make the choices that would help us. And that was just in the little window of the world I knew of. And so while I was at NASA, I was fortunate that they had a program at the time where they would actually pay for your education as long as it was benefiting them, that you were developing something. And so I petitioned to get a higher degree education, a PhD in science and technology policy and management, so that
Mhm.
I could understand the theories, the concepts, and maybe apply it. And so I got that degree, and then the next thing I know, I was asked to like kind of look at how do we do commerce, and how do we encourage commerce to happen. This is before any of the commerce really happened, and how do we make things happen? And I'm always kind of, believe it or not, kind of humble to the point of like, I don't know if I'm the person who can do this, but like, I might as well try. I figured like, I, I can do it. My joke was, and this is, it was like, I can do at least as bad a job as they can, like as has been, like, even if I screw up, like let's try something different or new. So that was why I kind of moved into the policy because I thought,
See.
well, there will be, and engineering is, and it depends. I had friends who were like, they were in that legendary group design space vehicles and they were living the dream, and they stayed there the entire, most of my colleagues stayed there the rest of their lives. And by the way, we are still friend, like we're all on this like email
Right.
chain, and like you're still part of the club no matter what happens. I'm one of the anomalies who kind of left, um, but that's why I said I want to go see if I can, help affect this in a way because I feel like we were all doing great work, but it was getting lost in some kind of shuffle. What I found out is it's really hard, even with my education and everything. It's hard because there were a whole lot of people involved, 535 Congress people and political, elected officials who have lots of different priorities, and there's all kind of things. But what you learn over your lifetime is leadership comes from different places and you got to be creative. It's just like we were talking before, perseverance, find a different path. if this organization can't carry it forward, maybe somebody else can in a different way, So, um, that's it's still, I'm still growing and learning and still trying to make a difference.
Yeah, no, I think that was a part of your journey I thought was really cool because you didn't just stick with something you were necessarily just comfortable with, and you kind of expanded your branches into, these leadership positions to foster a greater change in a different way. And so I thought that was really cool. And so now that we're able to learn a little bit about your journey as well as what you've done in, your career throughout your career time, my last and final question for you, which I've asked most everyone who's on this interview series, which is if you could go back in time to your younger self, maybe out of college as a young professional, if you could think back to those times, what one piece of advice would you give yourself?
Well, first of all, I'm I'm pretty I'm pretty sure whatever my younger self was, whether that was 12 or 20 or 25, wouldn't listen to me now. So, uh, it might be a moot issue. Um, I'm gonna tell
It could
myself,
be anything, just really to your career, life, just anything that you could think of that you would want to know when you were younger.
uh, to be more gracious. Um, I think it's the thing you learn in life is relationships are the most important thing, right? Achieving these things, none of anything I've done in my life, none of it I could have done without other people who help, whether they were mentors or supporters or partners and um, I think when at least most young people, and I know for myself, you're pretty self-focused and it's only, when you get much older, kind of now for me is like you realize like um that everybody's got a lot going on, like I had my own challenges in life, and we didn't talk about some, it's not what the show's about, but like, trust me, I had other things that had nothing to do with space or any of that, life and family and, like, and they're tough, but, other people do too. I'm not to say that I was insensitive when I was younger. I think I'm actually a pretty sensitive guy, but I wish I was even more gracious than whatever I was. Good news is I'm doing that now and trying to be, trying to be a better, be self-introspective and be better. And I have the opportunity now to still have lots of friends and colleagues and you know and trying to help not just in the big humanitarian picture, but person to person and for the people who matter.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Dr. Bush, for being so vulnerable and for sharing your story. I can personally say that I was incredibly inspired by your work and what you've been able to do and what you're continuing to do. And I'm sure everyone who's listening is as well. So thank you for taking your time out of your holiday season to come talk with us and to inspire all of the students who are going to go on to hopefully follow your footsteps and do great things. Thank you.
Thank you, Gitika, for having me. This is a wonderful thing you're doing. It's a gift to so many, and I'm looking forward to seeing all the things you're going to do.
Thank you.